Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
All right, so guys, thanks for being here. We've got Peter Andreyev and Michael Freeman from the New Jersey PBA. You guys want to explain a little bit what the PBA is? I know we see the stickers. You guys have the patches on. I said I'm the son of a law enforcement officer, so I know PBA. But Peter, if we want to start with you, just what is the PBA?
So we are an association that covers about 32,000 members in the state of New Jersey. We represent about 8 out of 10 police officers. The only ones that we do not represent are the New Jersey State Police. They have their own 3 unions, and there's about 3,000 plus of those members of their unions. We have membership and local associations from basically the tip of New Jersey up in Sussex County all the way down to Cape May County. And everything in between. Our tagline is we help those who help others, and I firmly believe that's what we do every day to ensure that our membership, are protected. We advocate for them. We ensure that they have good working conditions through assistance with their collective bargaining agreements, and basically, we are the the mouthpiece for our members. A lot of times our officers can't, say what they need to say. We can do that for them. We can also lobby the legislature for laws or also to lobby them to not enact certain legislation that may be detrimental to the law enforcement community in New Jersey. So I think we're a labor union / association / advocacy group for law enforcement in New Jersey.
And Peter, what's your role with the PBA?
So I am currently the president of our association. We were elected last year. Our term is till 2028. It's a 3-year term. I'm a police officer with the Point Pleasant Beach Police Department, and in order for me to do this, I'm on fully released from my department to attend to union issues throughout the state.
I was going to ask you about that, the kind of time split between what you guys do, because as we're sitting here, your cell phone's going off for PBA obligations, and if you're still actively on duty with Point Beach while you're doing this stuff too, or because this seems like this is a 24/7.
This is definitely a full-time job and then some. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We do get notifications at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when there's a critical incident. We do get the notifications at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when there's a critical incident. So it is a full-time job. It is a commitment that we are committed to the membership. They believe in us, and certainly I'm not going to let them down. So we're fully released and doing it every day for them.
And Michael, what about you? This always happens when we do these things. We were talking off camera beforehand, cracking up, going through all these things. And I was saying, based on my, not to make it about me, but my dad was in law enforcement for almost 30 years. I've always seen the PBA have their members back, go to bat for them on stuff, make sure guys aren't losing their benefits for whatever reason. And I was looking at, some of the stuff you've done, Michael. It looks like you wrote all these articles over the years for Cops Magazine. Looks like you were involved in, what was your, some of the negotiations with the legislator, the PBA labor relations coordinator and all that. What about you? What's your background? What are you doing now?
I'm still a full-time detective with I'm still an active duty detective with the Summit Police Department. I too am on full release from Summit for the past 9 years to handle union business, so to speak. Fortunately, it is the policy of the state of New Jersey that good labor relations comes from a union and management relationship that we can work together with. Summit had always understood that, and when I asked if I could be released to actually work for State PBA, they were gracious enough to agree that that's a good idea. Of course, State PBA reimburses Summit for my salary, and they're able to make sure that they have some coverage to cover my spot. I started as the vice president in charge of labor relations in the office. My job there was basically to coordinate all the contracts from, as Pete said, we have municipal, county, sheriffs, county police, county corrections, and state corrections. I would take all the contracts in, separate them by county essentially, give them to my committee, and they would dissect every piece of data that came out of those contracts. We could share those contracts for negotiations for the comparable jurisdictions that needed it. So I was very proud of what I was able to do. And when we had the opportunity for Pete and I to take over, based on retirements of our predecessors, we were happy to do it. But as he said, it's working in the state office. We have 5 active members there, and we're all full-time plus.
Okay.
It's rewarding, but it's demanding.
I could see that. And where is home base for you guys? Is it in Trenton?
No, our office is located on Main Street in Woodbridge.
Okay.
We're right in the middle of we're the intersection, right, where the Turnpike comes in, the Parkway comes in, 287, 440. Like, it's a perfect spot for everybody around the state.
That's cool. It's like the old days when they would actually base the Capitol about a central location, essentially.
Yep, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So you took over, was it Pat Cooligan?
Colligan. Pat
Okay.
Colligan.
He was there 10 years as president of the
Yep.
PBA?
Him and his executive vice president, Mark Kovar. Yep.
What was your role before then with the PBA?
So I was the first vice president when I came on in 2014. Well, I'm sorry, I was the second vice president in 2014, but then that first vice president retired. But so I was there to do the pension consultation and relationships with our membership. So what I was tasked to do was go out, educate our members on our pension system, how to retire. I don't want to shock you, but New Jersey is a little bit of a bureaucratic state, and sometimes with our pensions, there would be some mix-ups, some foul-ups, some errors that along the way that the employer or the division of pensions missed. So I would go out and help those officers retire, correct those issues that were wrong. And also provide seminars on how to retire and basically walk them through the process on how to file their application and submit it correctly so that there was no issues.
I've actually run across scenarios doing, we do personal injury, but we've run across scenarios where I actually had a case where an officer accidentally submitted his retirement papers the wrong way. It was supposed to be a disability temporary thing, but they took it as like you're done for good. And there seems like there's so many nuances to these things. And knowing, again, I'm not going to say this 50,000 times, but I probably will, like my dad being a retired police officer,
right.
The pension is one of the most important. It's the, huge benefit of the job, and having that and not having that get screwed up is so important to.
Absolutely, because it's for the rest of your life, right?
Yep.
And that's the other thing that we would explain to them that, look, you have to ensure that you have the correct information, your beneficiaries are up to date, because once, God forbid, something happens to that member and they pass on, that survivor, the current spouse, will receive a survivor's pension for the rest of her life until she remarries, or the widow or widower. So it's important that we were able to correct a lot of those things prior to them, quote unquote, clicking the button to submit their application. That's one thing too that with us, with Michael and I come on the pension side of the union. Mike did the labor relations side of the union. So I think for us as a team, we are pretty well-rounded in order to assist all of our members, because if it's either a pension issue or it's a collective bargaining issue, I think we have that pretty much covered. And I think, for the most part, and I don't use this term loosely, but I think we are, because of our prior experience into our positions as currently as president and executive vice president, I think that prior experience helps us to become more of an expert, if you will, on those specific topics. Because when we're in Trenton discussing legislation on pension issues or collective bargaining issues or whatever it may be, I think we are firmly entrenched in those issues because we have the experience there. We lived it. We have done it for our membership. Mike certainly had negotiated many contracts. I've negotiated many contracts, so we can understand that process. And just I would hope that our members, if they're listening, that they know that experience, we can utilize that experience to help our membership move forward.
That's awesome. I mean, that sounds like that's the kind of ideal package or combination of you two guys.
I think so. I think it works out very well. We were able to bounce things off. There were certainly nuances about pensions that I never really got into, so it's easy for me to ask Pete, what do you think? And it's the same thing with negotiations or any contract issues.
I find it fascinating. New Jersey, at least in my eyes, is such a unique state in that you can have, Jersey City, Newark, Trenton, Camden, down to the Pine Barrens to, pick some town in South Jersey where there's a population of like 200 people, and you have different law enforcement, agencies with different law enforcement needs, all the personalities that go into it, because at the end of the day, it's a human business. So just, yeah.
That is one of the things that it is, as you said, it is quite unique in New Jersey. 565 municipalities, nearly 500 individual police departments. We're also unique in that the sheriffs are not necessarily the main patrol function in most areas, where most other states, the sheriffs have equal footing on most areas. We are, and also the contracts obviously are completely different, and that's why the comparables were something we always talked about. And there's a lot more movement now between different police departments where people are looking to go to a bigger department, go to a smaller department, go to a department that pays more, go to a department that has more busier, more opportunities.
That's something you're seeing now? Guys making moves to other departments?
Yes. We're seeing an awful lot of that.
Yeah. Never before we have seen that. Like in your dad's time,
Yeah.
you got on that specific department and you stayed there for your 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was almost unheard of, I
Yeah.
feel like, back then.
Yep.
Oh, at the time, up until 2011, essentially, most police departments topped out at 5 years. It was always the belief that it takes about 5 years for a police officer to become good at their job, through the training experience, and you're comfortable doing pretty much everything. So that was the time when you reached top pay. Through the 2008 to 2011, we had the problems with the economy, and then the interest arbitration debacle that was thrust upon us.
What's that? This seems like a sore subject.
A little bit. Part of Chris Christie's pension reform toolkit was to place an arbitrary number on interest arbitration awards that we could receive, police and fire could receive, of 2%. That 2% cap meant that the entire salary budget for a municipality couldn't exceed 2% of the previous year, each year.
So then you get into the furloughs and all that.
Yes,
Yep.
got into layoffs, got into furloughs, got into all of that. So in order to avoid much of that, we started to have to write contracts that extended the steps, not just from 5 steps, where maybe an increase was $5,000. Now you're doing 8 steps, increasing each by $2,200. And as the years went on, we had to go to 10 steps, 12 steps, 15 steps. So now a police officer coming on won't reach top pay until you're 13, 14, 15. So a lateral jump to another police department is not so much of a financial hit, and that's why it's so much easier for people to do that. Back then, it was you were a top pay, you're not going anywhere.
Wow. So if you join a department, say you join as a patrolman, you can in 5 years reach the top step for that rank, and then otherwise you'd need to get promoted to make more. Is that?
You could back then. You could get it in 5 years. Yes, you'd make more each year. There would be a salary increase that's contractually negotiated, but it wouldn't be the large step increase that you were getting each of those first 4 years.
Got it. And I want to get into you guys. Like we don't have a roadmap for this. It's just we kind of just talk. But like I want to get into the current climate of what being a police officer looks like. It used to be, I heard, like municipalities, like they were turning people away left and right. They're like, we don't have spots. And now I like see advertisements for some departments, like, we're hiring, like, submit your applications. Just like what you guys are seeing with all that these days.
Well, I think, one of the unintended consequences of, the George Floyd incident back in 2020, and then the media, piling on saying that, law enforcement is bad, or don't trust your police officers, or whatever the case may be. And then you saw all those protesting video shots of around the country. It had a profound effect here in New Jersey, because I'll tell you, New Jersey police officers and troopers are the best trained law enforcement officers in the country. The way everything is set up here in New Jersey, like if you were to leave here to go to another state, they would automatically take our academy certificate and maybe just have to do like a 40-hour class on a conversion to those states' laws, right? Here in New Jersey, if you were to come from, say, Florida or Pennsylvania, New York, you'd have to go back to the police academy again. We don't accept that other stuff. We have a higher standard, I believe. So a lot of the things that was occurring around the country was not necessarily happening here in New Jersey. And I believe, again, our officers are the best trained. So therefore, they're in a lot of them, because of the higher salaries prior to when Mike's talking about where we had to do all of the, dipping and diving and as far as contractual steps are concerned, you had people who had law degrees. There were accountants. You had professional people who went to college, earned their degrees, were a little bit more mature because New Jersey had a little bit of a better pay scale than some states. So you had those people coming in and making it better, right? And becoming, administrators for the police departments, and they were good leaders in doing these things, right? That also contributed to the fact that why these officers were better trained, because the agencies recognized the fact that, some agencies required a college degree or at least a bachelor's degree to even take their test or be eligible for that. And now those people, those residents of New Jersey who have those advanced degrees or who have that more maturity for those positions are like, you know what? I see what's going on TV. I see that, the officers are being are completely being criminalized or scrutinized to the point where, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. Why would I want to put myself in something like that? Why would I want to place my family and my hard-earned pension and health benefits and everything that I've worked hard for, and maybe possibly someone's going to take my house? Why would I want to do that? So you know what? Good luck on that job, and you know what? And we'll see who else takes that job. And now, throughout the state, sometimes in some places, standards may have been lowered. May have been, instead of now requiring a college degree or a 4-year degree or a associate's degree, now it's just, high school diploma. Now you're looking at getting kids who are 19, 20 years old. They can't even buy a beer, but now they're going out on patrol and stopping cars and writing summonses and locking people up. So again, and that comes with its challenges too, because you have that immaturity factor. There's no life experience, right? So, I think that has severely, placed a burden on our police administrators around the state to try and go out and recruit and retain even the best possible candidates, because even the retention, like we talked about before, well, why would I want to wait 15 years to get to step 15? I'm in step 5 making $50,000 when I can go over to another department. Maybe they'll hire me at their step 8 and it's an $80,000 job and maybe work there. So again, the unintended consequences of Chapter 78 in the 2008-2011 era, where they created these strains on collective bargaining by enabling the 2% cap, creating these steps, creating all these things, made police officers almost like free agents now. Well, you know what? Why would I want to work from Point Pleasant Beach making $65,000? I can go to Summit.
It's college sports now.
Correct. It's like yeah, exactly
transfer portal,
right? It's transfer portals and all that stuff, right? So again, I firmly believe that not just one thing had made everything this way. It was it's everything. It's everything.
Combination of everything, including when I became a police officer. Obviously, like in 1994, I took a test. We had the cap in Summit. They test to 300 applicants. Because they knew they had 5 spots. So took the top 5, obviously, from that exam process. Now there's no way you're going to get 300 applicants for spots.
And on the public side, that's the scenario you want. The one you're talking about in 1994, where there's 300 and you're taking the best 5.
That's obviously I came out number 1, so I'm going to say they took the best of the best. But again, the other 4 that were hired with me, and then we were subsequently able to get more out of the academy from the alternate route program, in which they were selected as the best of the best from the academy class as they went in. I don't know if we're getting the best of the best now, because those people, again, are making other decisions in life. Because truly, I knew becoming a police officer, I'd never be rich. I can't get rich as a police officer. But I also knew I'd never be poor. I knew that I could go to work, I'd have a good health plan, and I would have my family be protected with that, and I would have a pension after 25 years, essentially, of doing this job, if I did it well enough. Or stay longer, which I ended up doing anyway. But it was a good job to have, a secure job to have, and just as long as I did the right thing, I would be able to provide for my family, and that's what a job really essentially is supposed to do. Now, a young person coming on, say, I got hired as 26 years old, and my chief insisted that we be mature. He wanted people that were married, that were on their own, not living at home with mom and dad, so that they could make those decisions going into someone's house for a domestic violence situation,
Sure.
be able to talk about, the light bill is high and the wife is yelling about what the husband is doing with this, and that's what the fight is going to start. He didn't want a young kid going in there to come to his house to tell him how to yell at his wife. That's what his words.
Yeah.
So essentially, if I'm at 26 years old back then, I was married and I did have a child on the way. I couldn't take myself from the job that I had already, which was making a really good living at the time, take nearly a 40% pay cut, looking to recoup that after 9 years at that point.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have taken this job. And so people that are in my position now are not coming onto this job.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the, like, it sounds all doom and gloom. What's the solution? What do you guys see changing? Or is it just, what you got? Sorry to put you on the spot with that, but because it truly does. And not to cut you off, but like growing up, I said I'm not going to keep talking about it. Like my dad was like my hero. It's like he looked like a freaking superhero, putting on his outfit and going in.
Uniform, not outfit.
Yeah, uniform. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
You have a nice outfit today.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Nice tie.
Puts the uniform on. He's got a 6-pack. I'm like, man, this guy's awesome. Like,
I think that actually it is starting to change in the sense that we are getting people that are growing up, learning how the life is. So I want to speak to a young police officer now. It's easier to speak to an old guy say, the job sucks, blah, blah, blah. I used to be able to do this.
Hold on. I was going through the Cops magazine. It was something like oh man, I got to say it. It's the corrections officer. It's like the only thing they hate about the way things are is change.
Yes. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So
The two things that cops say.
Yeah.
The way things are and
change.
Yep. Yes. So basically, old cops, myself, Pete, have been around for a while. We can look back in the days when we were, running and gunning as youngsters, doing all sorts of stuff that was exciting. It was fun. It was great. And it's not necessarily curtailed now, but it is more it's more regulated, I guess, more professional. And I think that was the goal when we came on.
Yep.
We wanted to be more professional. I think these younger cops now have been indoctrinated coming through the academy and through high school. This is the way life is, and this is the way you're going to behave. This is the way you're going to treat people. So they don't see a difference. They're not upset by a change in yelling at somebody. They're not upset by a change in the way we were able to do the job, what we felt was necessary. Not that we ever beat anybody like that, but it was just a different attitude, a different feel, because we had that look, that the command presence, and it was a lot different back then.
Yeah.
Now there is more talking, there is more convincing, there is more understanding, I guess, which is good because the people that are coming on the job now have been raised that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, now they also are more in tune with all the attempts through the Attorney General's office to diffuse situations, right? So now they're getting that training in the police academy where we didn't get that training, where it was like, all right, you're on your own, sink or swim, figure it out. I think now that's why I say to you that we are the best trained because they've learned all those lessons over the last 30, 40 years, and now are putting that kind of training into the police academies where they're making these kids come out, more well-rounded, if you will.
It's such an interesting profession in that, like, there's a physical element to it. Obviously, you picture like the classic movie, police officers chasing after a bad guy. Physical element, there's such a psychological element to it. Like you need to be almost like therapist, negotiator, able to read people and assess situations in like a split second. Because like we were talking about before, the 999 times you do the right thing, no one's going to hear about that.
Right.
But the one time if you do something wrong, that's going to be front page news, and you have to make these like split second, high intensity decisions on like a regular basis. So there's a lot of components to it that I feel like does that get covered in the police academy? Is that what you're talking about? How New Jersey's kind of different?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
That's cool.
Absolutely. I mean,
They put you into that situation. They put that stress on you. I recall the first day, the police academy, it was the orientation day where you have to show up at 5 a.m. And stay in your car. That's what you're instructed. Stay in your car till you're told to get out. It's dark. It was January. And then you hear some people just screaming from, get out, God, and they're all sorts of profanity screaming out, and you're nervous, and you grab your stuff, you run into the building, and when you get inside, now, you did it wrong. Get out of my building. And it's just, oh my God, what's going on? Back and forth.
Yeah.
Get on your face, push-ups, this, that, and just putting you through a stressful situation. And then they're talking to you, try to explain some things, and then somebody would just go nuts for no reason whatsoever, and now you have to react again. So from the moment you showed up, you never knew what to expect, but you still had to perform properly. And I think they did a great job. In retrospect, I was, I didn't know what was going on.
That's called parking lot day.
That's the thing.
Yeah, when you get parking lot day, that's the immersion into law enforcement right there.
Because it's obviously, it's a paramilitary type thing. Like you see when guys go through, we're close to Seagirt, when guys go through the police academy down there, if I'm not wrong, guys are getting like their head shaved and everything like that. Yep. Yeah, it's like you see him jogging around. You're like,
yeah, we lost one guy in the academy because he refused to get his haircut. He didn't come back in.
Well, I like this. So they'll basically like break you down to build you back up so that you can handle the situations more so out when you're in the field.
Yes,
that's great.
I think we're very well prepared here. When you come out of the police academy, you have the knowledge, the basics.
Yep.
But then you still have to go through field training in your individual department with an officer that works in that community, and that officer will teach you the streets, number one.
Yeah.
The rules and regulations of the department, the politics of the town, whatever it may be, and you'll learn more. You never stop learning, actually.
Oh, you never stop learning.
It's like what we do. We say it's a law practice because you're never done. You're always practicing. You're always learning and learning. Like,
That's exactly it. I mean, because there's always new laws that come out. There's new guidelines and directives that come out, and constantly when we do the training for our annual qualifications, right? Our department incorporates the training of the day. So the updates on domestic violence laws, the updates on pursuit laws, the updates on the Attorney General guidelines, all those things that are updated every year, every whatever. When you go to shoot, you got to go and sit down and do all those trainings. So,
oh, that's great. I remember just going back real quick to the police academy stuff. I remember again my dad saying like they would do this scenario where they'd go to a recruit. They'd be like, "All right, it's 2:00 in the morning. You see this car swerving. You pull it over. You get up to it. You smell alcohol, and you roll down the window, and it's your best friend. What do you do?" The guy's like, "Well, he's drunk driving." He's like, I have to arrest him. And he's like, "But it's your best friend." And he's like, "Aren't you going to give him a break?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." He's like, "So what do you want to do? Do you give him a break?" He's like, "All right, yeah, maybe I offer to give him a ride home." He's like, "All right." Then he goes to step out of the car. A bag of cocaine falls out, suspected cocaine. What do you do? He's like, then I arrest him. Really? Come on. It's your best friend. He lives right down the street. And but the example, I think, is that like, there's so much discretion. There's so many difficult decisions that you need to make with your job.
Absolutely. I think, as I said earlier, once you get that 5 years in, so to speak, you pretty much have the confidence to know that you're doing the right thing. You're always, as long as you're making mistakes you're going to make mistakes. Yeah. Everybody has to make mistakes. But as long as you do it with the right mindset, you're not going out of your way. You don't want to violate anybody's rights. You don't want to put anybody at risk. That's for sure. But you do have discretion. You want to take care of, and not just your best friend. There are people that are having a bad day, and they've done something that's technically illegal, of course, yes. But you don't need to arrest everybody that you come across because they've quote-unquote committed a crime or some type of offense. You have to take care of the situation. You want to preserve life and protect property. That's the oath that we took, and that's our ultimate law enforcement goal.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's also the directives of the chief too, right? If they want you to go out and do certain things, well, you got to go out and do certain things. Yeah, and especially if you take the like this time of year, right? It's Memorial Day weekend. Mm-hmm. There's going to be DWI patrols here in the shore area. We're here in Belmar. I live in Point Pleasant, right? I just came up Highway 71 through Seagirt, Spring Lake, everything else like that, right? So later tonight at about 9:00, that's going to be the gauntlet, right? Everybody coming out of these bars and stuff like that. That's going to be a tough ride to go wherever, to their shore homes or wherever they're renting and stuff like that. So, but like I tell my kids who are 22 and 24, nowadays there is absolutely zero reason to drive drunk.
Oh,
absolutely 0.
100%.
Between Uber, between Lyft, between even new good old school taxis, right? Or friends who now know that obviously you always have a designated driver. At least with my kids, I can see it how they do it. There's absolutely no reason. Look, again, I live in Point Pleasant. All right, the train here in Belmar. I said even take the train home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then walk home from from the train station. We're not far. So, but other places that are not as compact as our shore area here, it would be difficult. But still, between the Uber and the Lyft, you can always find the ride home. You may pay for it, but I'd rather pay $45 to get home for 2 miles than have to go through a DWI hearing and a trial and all the things that go along with that. So again, there's absolutely zero reason for that. So
I will say, to your point, it seems like this generation of younger kids and stuff, they're like drunk drive. Like, are you kidding me? No way. Like, he's our designated driver. Whereas generations before,
oh my God,
come on. Like, and even not,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say my generation, but even not that long ago,
Right.
people if you were in your 20s going to a party, you were like,
Yep.
I'm going to.
God will get you home.
So I hear, Jesus, take the wheel. But nowadays, which is great, kids are like, no
absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. So, and again, I mean, that's like Mike said before, this next generation of men and women, they've been kind of taught on how to, behave and things like that. And I think that's why, we're getting, behavior that's been going on. I mean, that's what it is. So, yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about the political side of the PBA? Like, are you in Trenton all the time? Are you, what's the interplay with the governor, the legislator, all the
So
stuff?
yeah, we are also a political action union. We do lobby for our membership. We do lobby for laws to make our members' lives better, their working conditions better. And then we're also there in Trenton to also try and stop certain legislation that may be detrimental to our membership. We'll take the mask law that just came out. The legislature was intent on going after the Immigration Customs Enforcement with the masks. Those guys are wearing them for a reason. They're being doxxed. They're being, they're getting their faces and whatnot plastered all over the internet. So I can understand why those officers for the Immigration Customs are using that tact, if you will. But there was certain amendments in that law that helped New Jersey law enforcement. We had to put it in there because there are certain conditions where our officers are going to be wearing the masks because of just the nature of their job. So if they're going to execute a search warrant and they're part of a special operations team that's going to go break the door down, they're going to be wearing masks, right? If there's a hazardous materials situation going on, a hazmat incident, you're going to want those officers to put the respirators and the masks on, right? There's other, that's just off the top of my head. There's other things in there that protects our members, cold weather being one of them, like the cold, recent winter we just had.
Yeah.
These officers were out there directing traffic because of an accident or whatever. It's cold. It's -5 degrees outside, and you want them to be protected. So again, we were looking for the protections of our officers at the same time, trying to compromise on a law that the legislature was hell-bent in doing. But we had to find that common ground, and I think we did. Look, it's not perfect. Nothing's really perfect, but at the same time, we could live with it because, again, our officers are protected by that law.
So what were they going for? Just a blanket, no mask,
no mask, no
face
nothing.
covering,
Yeah,
coverage,
absolutely nothing at all.
Conditions.
Yep.
Is it a lot of it you feel like you guys need to educate and be
Yes.
like, look, this is how law enforcement really goes? Because someone that just sees, ICE hypothetically going and taking a family and young kids with a mask on, they're like, no masks. But all those things that you just talked about, someone that's not involved in law enforcement might not even think about. Like, as you were saying them, I was like, oh, that's a great point.
Hey, look, I tell you, now the Teslas, right? When those cars go on fire, it's a hazmat incident because of the fact that there's batteries and chemicals and things like that are in those cars. Even just a normal newer regular car fire, you have all kinds of things going on. So these officers have to protect themselves because, you don't want them to go home. Look, I'll even give you another example. Many years ago, I went to a first aid call where the person had shingles, right? So now we're putting masks on because we don't want to go in there, and because now it's a health kind of it's a welfare for the officers, right? So again, we'd have to educate our legislators who, just didn't think about that and say, look, yeah, I get it. I understand why you want to do this. However, look at it from this practical perspective. It's a practicality why we need to have masks on certain times, things like that for the performance of the jobs. Look, I've been in patrol my entire career, right? Up until 2014 when I left to go up to the state PBA office. I can tell you on one hand that, when I wore a mask and it was during the winter and you're trying to do your job, right? Because you're outside and doing all those things. I've never personally had to wear a mask to arrest anybody, but when I was there, when we were executing a search warrant, in one of our motels in town, I saw those guys because, again, the dust, the debris, when you're breaking down the door, because you're now, a judge allows you to do that through the search warrant to go in and do all that stuff. You don't want to breathe all that stuff. And plus, it's just because you need to have that safety there, So again, the legislature would realize some of that, and they did compromise and they did allow those amendments to get in there. So we weren't, it was something we could live with. And again, this piece of legislation, come hell or high water, was happening. We just had to be able to contour it to benefit our membership.
For us, a lot of it is legislation, education. As you said, they don't understand what the ramifications are.
Sure.
Even when the intent is perfect. We have to give them the boots on the ground sort of perspective. I think that we've been doing a really good job. We meet all the legislators. We try to meet every legislator as they're elected, and then we have relationships with them. So they'll want to call us and say, what do you think of this? This is what I want to do. What do you think? And for the most part, that works out very well. And there are times when they don't think to call, and we can reach out to them. We have very good relationships with everybody. The Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Assembly, the Senate President, with the Governor's office. We are able to talk to pretty much anybody and give them our opinion based on what we need to do. The Attorney General's office. We have constant meetings with the Attorney General's office, the Policing Strategy Initiative Office, the Chiefs of Police Association, the Prosecutors Association. It's all law enforcement, and we're all working for the same goal. Just because we're the union does not mean we're adversarial to management at all, because we're trying to make, as I said, preserve life, protect property. That's our ultimate goal. But we have a different perspective than a management than a chief of police would have, because even a chief will want to do something because it's the right thing to do. But how does that affect the officer, and how can the officer actually get that done?
Yeah, 100%. Seeing when an officer rises through the ranks and things, it's almost like you become, you're in administration more so than you're actually doing police work.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So to have that kind of 1,000-mile view that you guys do of like, okay, this is the boots on the ground, these are their needs and what they have going on, then this is as you go up the ranks, like how all of this affects everybody.
Even with us, Pete and I have been out of the office, off the street for so long that we need to go talk to regular patrol officers that are new to the job. They're seeing it, and we have to find out exactly how is this going to affect you if you're trying to work. And we'll talk to the sergeant. How are you going to talk to your officers? How can you direct these officers? And we have to get the information from everybody, but we can collect it and then give it to the legislator or to the governor's office.
Right. So like when the body cameras first came out, right? I never worked with a body camera. I worked with car cameras, in-car cameras, and the dash camera and stuff like that. And, having the wireless microphone, which I loved, but I never had the body camera. So I wasn't proficient enough to explain to legislators on how it works. So one of the range days that I had to go qualify, I asked my supervisors, I said, hey, give me your tutorial on this. Like, explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because I need to know that, right? And, he was able to do that for me and was able to run through it. So now I have a working knowledge of the body camera and what its limits are, what its capabilities are, and things like that. So now if there's another bill that may come down where, they're going to tweak something on body cameras, hold on a second. This is what is what I know about it. This is how we know it. This is how I was trained with it, and things like that. So again, the job has changed since Mike and I come off the road. It's changed a lot dramatically in the last several years. But again, we're constantly keeping ourselves up to date through our own departments, just because we need to if we're going to advocate properly for the membership.
I was going to ask about the body cameras, like how that has affected you guys' profession. I think about like the person that gets pulled over and pulls their cell phone out. It's like, you're pulling me over. But and like we said, behind you, the thing you're looking at, the plaque on the wall there's no such thing as an IME. That's those defense medical examinations we were talking about. They call them independent medical, and they're not.
Yeah.
So we have a nurse go and record it, and the best evidence oftentimes is the video evidence of what happened. So how that plays out.
We have found the same thing. I've always been an advocate of the cameras, partially my ego. As I always said, watch me work. This is going to be great. I love it.
You're playing it back at night. Honey, look at this. Look at this.
Yeah, he was the guy ripping the CD out of it and saying, look what I did tonight.
Not necessarily mine, but I got to be honest. I did share a car with a guy who was hysterical. I worked nights, he worked days when I was in patrol. And the first thing I did when I checked the camera was go back and watch his tapes from all day. And I just laughed my ass off, I got to say it. He talked to himself. He was a very, by the book, straightforward, direct. He was a Marine. His voice was very commanding. And so he would get, after a traffic stop, he'd come back into the car. The hell is this guy doing right here? This is have a whole conversation with himself as he's writing a ticket or he's making calls and do whatever. And I just laughed. I'd call him sometimes. That was good. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
But essentially, even he, like I said, he was the kind of guy that had a true command presence. He wasn't warm and fuzzy by any stretch of the imagination. He wasn't. I wouldn't say he was nice. He was nice. He was cordial. He was professional every step of the way. But he was He was tough.
Yep.
And he got complaints for his demeanor. But I would always be the first one to watch his tapes because I thought they were funny. But he never said anything wrong. He never was disrespectful to anybody. So when the complaints would come in and you play the tape back, and the question would be, was this officer was rude to you? In what way? And the person could say, well, he wasn't nice. Well, he was. He's just speaking, why would you make that turn the way you made that turn, ma'am? Something, some silly question like that. And it was just an ability to defend a perception more than what the reality was.
Right.
And that was something that I always thought was great. And I think body cams are showing the same thing. And it certainly reduces the number of demeanor complaints that we get.
That's great.
Or when the demeanor complaint comes in right away, hold on, let's go to the videotape, right? Like that old TV newscaster. Let's go to the videotape, right?
Warner Wolf.
Yeah, Warner Wolf, right? And, they as soon as they play it, and they go, okay, well, here it is. Look what the officer did. This is what happened, And 99% of the time, the officer did nothing wrong. It's just that perception, like he said, that professional command presence, and the officer was curt to me. All right, that you don't have to
you
be
were
warm and
doing
fuzzy.
85 and a 35.
Yeah, the officer was curt because exactly, or the school zone is going on, and look, we just had an unfortunate incident in Brick Township, right? And you're going through a school zone, and of course the officer's going to be upset because maybe his kids were going through, or your kids are walking through there. It's all about, like Mike said, preserving life and property, right? And now you're trying to protect those kids who are just innocently going to school like they're supposed to be doing, and something bad like that happens. So again, we're all for body cameras. I remember when they were coming out and legislation was being proposed and drafted. I know I was in the office at the time, and with our predecessor, Mark Kovar and Pat Colligan, we were discussing all this stuff. And those guys had more time than us even. Those guys got hired before we did. So they certainly they had to sit back and think about it because of all the nuances of that bill. And again, it's a perfect solution to all of the accusations that come about through everybody.
Yeah.
And again, the officers are consistently being shown that they're being professional. They are in the right. They are on the right side of the law, more times than not. And that the people who are complaining about them are the ones that are wrong, and also just mad that they got a summons or got arrested or whatever the case may be. It's the old saying back in the day when I first graduated the police academy, the old timers used to say, if you didn't get that green sheet, you're not doing your job the right way. And the green sheet's the old complaint.
Sure.
Now it's all AOC. It's computerized. So now it's all like printed on the Xerox printer.
Yeah.
But you had a form where you typed it out, and the green sheet was the defendant's copy. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
so that was the thing. So again, but the problem is we don't want to be that if you got the green sheet doing. We want to make sure that our officers are doing the right thing, the right time, on the right side of the law, and didn't violate anybody's right. So that's where these cameras come in, and it's been absolutely wonderful for these officers.
So my first year out of law school, I worked for the prosecutor's office in Monmouth County. And I had a case one time where a guy got pulled over and suspected marijuana. And he like wouldn't let the officers search his car, and it turned into, they found like seeds or something, but it turned into this brawl in the middle of a street, and he ended up getting charged, aggravated assault, all these different things. And the moral of the story, essentially, the case law that like I was arguing, is you don't get to be the judge, jury, and executioner of your own case on the street. Let the police officer do his job, and then let the court system, sort it out. I say that as, an idealist and someone that, thinks that that's how it's supposed to go. But it makes sense to me. Like, you guys have a tough enough job. The body cameras, I think, have to be great just because of exactly what you said. Like, it exonerates the officers who are doing things the right way. And if there's officers that aren't doing the right things, you would want to know about that too.
Absolutely.
Have the opportunity to correct that.
Absolutely.
And do what you can. But it's, what's the intro to Law and Order, where it's like the criminal justice system is, talks about the police officers and the prosecutors and all that.
Yes.
It's a system, and it's supposed to work, the way that that it does.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think it does a good job. So how are you guys doing? How are we doing on time, Oscar? 45 minutes. Cameras are good? All right. So I went through this magazine.
I'm
guys
really
have.
impressed you read the magazine.
You know what? Jerry makes fun of me. Sometimes Jerry and I do this podcast together. A lot of times we do. Typically we do. But he makes fun of me because I do a little research beforehand and things. And I read this last night at my kitchen counter because we have the same thing for lawyers. And you'll flip through it and it'll be like, AI is revolutionizing the industry, right. Well-being of attorneys and things like that. So I kind of wanted to see what like the hot button issues were going on with you guys. But one of the first things I got to in this, and Mike, I think you had written it, but Pete, you went as well to Poland. You went to Auschwitz.
Yes.
Did that experience? So what's kind of like the PBA, like when I think of like a union or when I think of like an organization that protects its members and stuff, like the PBA is one of like the main ones that I think of. I feel like it's got a lot of outreach. It does a lot for the community. This is like global. So you guys went to Auschwitz, Poland, did all that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We were invited by one of our chaplains, Rabbi Mendy Karlbach. He invited us to go join in on the International March of the Living, which is an annual memorial service for Holocaust survivors that are invited there. There are fewer and fewer each year, of course, but there's still several left, which means it wasn't all that long ago. But the March of the Living is organized. It's led by law enforcement officers from Auschwitz to Birkenau. And you're able to go and commune with people from all over the world. There were 130 law enforcement officers from around the world that got together. And this year we led, I think it was 7,000, 8,000 people on the march. And the number was actually low because of the conflict over in
Sure.
Iran and Israel, what's going on over there. So we were immediately struck when we got to Auschwitz with how palpable the pain, the misery, the hate, everything was, as it's a museum essentially, but it's a large group of structures. All the buildings are still intact. There are artifacts inside the buildings of the people that were brought there. And then the march that we actually take from Auschwitz to Birkenau, you see the difference between Auschwitz, which was a concentration camp, and Birkenau, which was a death camp. It was built because they couldn't kill people efficiently enough in Auschwitz. So they had to find a better way to exterminate these people. And to be able to stand there and feel the pain was a very moving experience for us. And we spoke on it. Pete and I were concerned of the look of law enforcement because of the role that law enforcement played in the Holocaust back then. And particularly we were there with some members of the New Jersey State Troopers, Jewish Troopers Association, and they were in uniform. Mm. And that the uniform could be a trigger. But fortunately, when we got to the ceremony in Birkenau, there was a torch lighting, the 7 torches that were lit. The 3rd torch was protection, and that is what law enforcement symbolizes. So we had law enforcement leaders across the country, including the new superintendent of state police here, and a member of the institute from Rutgers.
It's a Miller Center on Policing at Rutgers University.
And they were speaking as to what the role of law enforcement was and how the role of law enforcement is now. And we are the ones that are going to lead the charge in saying never again. We are the people that are the power. We are the ones that can lead others to safety. That's our role. We are the protection that needs to be. And I was extremely moved by that speech. And so much so that I woke up at 5:30 in the morning and wrote that whole article just because of it.
It's an awesome article, and I'm not just saying that because you're sitting across from me. Like I was like, honey. I flagged it and stuff. Seriously, you have a whole thing on there, like how, and if you've listened to this podcast or if you ever do and go back, like Jerry usually talks about like how attorneys are thought of as like one of the last like bastions of democracy. I think it's like Shakespeare or something is like, kill all the attorneys, but the rest of the speech is like, because then like tyranny can reign free.
Yes.
But it's the same thing with law enforcement. Like you guys are actually like the muscle behind the protect democracy and things like that. We've got, our little briefs and our arguments and things, but you guys are I don't want to keep saying boots on the ground, but it's the same thing about protecting democracy, people's rights and freedoms.
Well, it's the whole thin blue line, right? The
Sure.
thin blue line is, and there's a lot of, during the George Floyd, they would say, during the George Floyd incident and era, they would, the progressives would say, or those that were anti-law enforcement would say that thin blue line symbolized racist tendencies. Well, I got to tell you, you know what? In New Jersey, you have an Asian police officer who is the president of the association. You have a African-American police officer who's the executive vice president of the largest law enforcement union in the state of New Jersey. I've worked with, police officers that are of certain minorities. I've worked with police officers that are not of any minority descent. And I can tell you that me personally, witnessing in my 30-year career, I've never witnessed any police officers acting in a racist manner towards somebody while doing their job or doing anything. You know what I mean? So that, to me, I take offense to that when someone says something like that to us. I think now in New Jersey, just based on our demographics, I think New Jersey police officers are some of the most diverse in the nation. Not counting New York City, of course, but with that, I think we have a very large, diverse group of officers. If you come into our meeting, you'll see officers that are of Hispanic descent, of Muslim descent. You have our Jewish officers, our Christian officers, our Buddhist officers. Right? We have in New Jersey a large cross section of society, and that's what it should be. And that's why, like I said, with when you were just saying, as far as the safety is concerned, we are that thin blue line. We are that line that basically is between chaos and law and order. And again, when those people whoever they may be, were contending that thin blue line flag was a racist flag, I have to take offense to that. So, and try to explain to those people that no, it's not that. It's because of the order, the law and order side of it. Because if there were no police, if we got rid of all the municipal and state and county police officers in the state of New Jersey, and now the National Guard or the military coming in, so now you're basically affecting that federal troops now, the residents and citizens of the United States have now become the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas that's not the case here, right? So again, that's where it, and again, ties into what we witnessed in Auschwitz and Birkenau, is because now the German government, the Nazis, made the police become agents of the federal government, and then thus the citizens of those countries became the enemy. And that's where law enforcement was no longer law enforcement. It was an agent of the state, and therefore they were taking the agent of the government, and then everybody became an enemy if you weren't in the Nazi party.
That's a great point. It basically became an extension of that
Correct.
regime as opposed to an autonomous, I see the phrase like community policing sometimes.
Correct.
And
right.
I picture I don't know if it's like Norman Rockwell, picture the police officer sitting, having an ice cream.
And I'm sure your parents had it in your house, right?
100%. It was upstairs with my parents, like their little, where they get dressed and stuff. Yep. I picture that aspect of things.
Yep. And that picture's called The Runaway. And
okay.
there is, because if you see the kid, he's got a stick with the bandana and the red bandana and all his worldly belongings there, right? And the officer's saying, "Hey, where are you going today, kid?" So again, protecting of life, property, and things like that.
So I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned before some of the legislation and things. I saw something about Daniel's Law in this magazine too. If you guys are cool talking about that Absolutely. A little bit, because again, going back to the 90s, early 2000s when I was growing up, it was just really the phone book back then. And my dad would be like, hey, we're not listed in the phone book. We had a P.O. box. Friends would be like, hey, can I get your number? And like, if I didn't really want to hang out with them, my dad could be like, let's tell him your dad's a police officer. You don't give out your phone number. But nowadays, I mean, you can just find everything online, and it looks like that obviously the tragic thing that happened, that's become a big issue.
So look, Daniel's Law is probably one of the best laws for law enforcement, for the law enforcement community. Unfortunately, it had to take a tragedy with a sitting judge for this to happen. I'll go back to that whole ICE thing before, the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. Those officers are wearing the masks because they're being doxxed, because they're getting all their information spread across the internet, and they were going viral with that stuff. Daniel's Law is a very specific law that protects law enforcement's identity, their homes, their phone numbers, their family members, and they're all considered protected or covered persons. What happened for those listening that may not know what Daniel's Law is, so one of our sitting judges ruled against a defense attorney in a case, and the defense attorney went online and Googled that judge's name, found out where she lived, went to her house, knocked on the door, and the son answered the door, and that defense attorney, deranged defense attorney, took a shotgun and murdered that judge's son at the doorstep, the threshold of their sanctity, their home, right? So obviously it was a lot of investigation. So quickly the law enforcement community located that suspect, defense attorney, arrested him, and then we had to do something to protect those that can't do their jobs properly if they're in fear, right? Considering judges, police officers, attorneys. So the legislature came together. They wrote this bill. It's a great bill, and it protects the identities of the judges and the police officers when they're doing their jobs. So much so that now the state of New Jersey inserted an amendment to that language where it now goes after the data brokers who consistently sell your information online, like Facebook, for example, right? How funny is it when you're sitting there talking to, let's talk about Yeti cups, and all of a sudden
you get an advertisement for it.
All of a sudden, right? How is that, right? So then all of a sudden that happens. So now we are going through Daniel's Law. We partnered with this firm called Atlas Privacy to help us go after and sue civilly those data brokers who are not following the law here in New Jersey. So much so we've been so successful that these data brokers now are trying to lobby the legislature to amend Daniel's Law and saying that they need to take that part out so that a third party can't, like, in other words, I can't come to your law firm here and say, hey, Mark, I need your help. Let's sue LexisNexis because they're not taking my information down off the internet. Well, we can do that now. So now we've partnered through our association. Our members, through our legal protection plan, have this in place. They just have to sign up for it. And we've been pushing this out. That's why it's in our magazine.
Yeah.
We talk about it at every meeting so that our members now they're covered, 32,000 plus their families and their homes. They can then be covered under this Daniel's Law where their information will not be shared over the internet. Now, again, there are some bad actors out there that are still not taking the information off of the internet. And that's why Atlas Privacy is going through our partnership with them is suing those bad actors to get that information down.
I saw, just looking through the magazine, some of those data brokers, some of those firms you're talking about, they're paying attorneys like $2 million a day to fight for this.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. We fight these giant insurance companies where it's like a whole David and Goliath thing, and they will just throw money after money at these issues to try and beat you down. And
it just begs to ask the question, how much money are those data brokers making off of our information going on the internet where they're willing to spend tens of millions of dollars to stop this law?
Yeah. What do they say? Like, if you don't know what the product is, it's probably you. Like,
Yeah.
if you're not paying for something and you're just like,
Yep.
you're probably the product. Yeah, that's wild to me. And that looks like that's an issue that you guys are kind of prevailing on. It's
so far, look, we've been able to lobby.
We've run at every turn so far.
Yep.
But again, they keep appealing. Now they're at the $2 million a day mark with the attorneys, but we've won so far every step of the way.
Yeah. And they've been trying to lobby some of the sitting legislators to amend that law, and we've been successful there. Once we explain again, goes back to what we talked about earlier.
100%.
Once we explain and educate the legislators as to what happened here and why it's important, they go, yeah, that's a pretty good idea.
so, like I talked about with the lawyer equivalent of this magazine, So something right now that's going on in California, I think it's Uber is, doing this ballot initiative to cap attorneys' fees at 25% on, I think it's all cases and it's framed like, the accident victim, compensation bill or whatever, to make sure that people that get injured get 75% of whatever recovery is. And at first blush, you're like, wow, that's great. If someone gets hurt, they get all this money. But what it does is it disincentivizes attorneys to want to take on cases, because when you really break it down, it's like it's just not going to be profitable.
Yeah.
And all this stuff. And the way it's framed and the way it's presented and the money that they're throwing at it, it's the same type of thing that for our industry and with what we do, because to get quality representation, all that, like we work on a contingency fee basis. We're not getting paid unless we win. Mm-hmm. So we could spend years and years and, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a case. And yeah, it's a big, all these things are big fights, and you got to really educate on them, like you guys are saying that you do.
Yep. And thankfully, again, the legislators here in New Jersey, they've been very good with us. They've listened to us, and they've listened to our partner, Atlas Privacy. And again, we couldn't do this without Atlas Privacy, because again, those guys there, that whole firm, they have been just such wonderful partners, because they break it down, they explain it to us and how these things can affect you. So I'll give you an example. When we were going through this, I'm one of the people who are with a bunch of our members who are actually named in the lawsuit as plaintiffs against like LexisNexis and all the other things, right? So I didn't realize that at the time, because again, I'm not so technologically advanced, or I don't do like my kids do. They're instantly on their phones and boom, they bring up some information. So the investigative reporter for this magazine, it's like a techie magazine. I don't remember the name of it, but he comes into our office and he goes, I want to show you something. I want to get your reaction to something. I said, all right, yeah, what's up? He gets on his phone. He then not only Googles my name, but Google's, everything about this, right? And then not only that, he went to all these other different sites that I didn't even know existed, right? And he showed me a picture of my home. He showed me a picture of my spouse and my kids. He showed me, off Facebook, off, Instagram, off all that stuff, because you're all tagged, and all that stuff, right? And he showed me all that stuff. He showed me pictures of my family, my sisters, my brothers, my extended family. And I was like, you're kidding me, right? Yeah. And at that point, that's when I realized how important it is for, our officers to be protected through Daniel's Law. And again, why we understand, why the ICE officers are wearing those masks and things like that. Because there's people that have bad intentions out there to inflict harm on these officers and things like that. And not to say that's happening here in New Jersey, because I'm not sure it really is, but I'd rather know that I'm protected and know that could not happen, or the possibility of it happening very limited, than not having this protection. And it's a free-for-all like in other states.
It's the same thing we were kind of talking about before. It's like, bad actors. It's just a scary environment to live in, period, because of the thousands of, say, traffic stops you have or whatever. It takes one crazy person just to and you have to have that concern. Like I know my dad would be like, you see a lot of like the negative side of people like in this world and all that. And you kind of unfortunately have to like assume the worst and be prepared for the worst. Like I'll go to my parents' house. They live in a quiet, like nice little suburban neighborhood.
Right.
Go to their front door. I'm like, front door is locked. Like they're right in there every time. And I'm like, no one's breaking into your house. Like in the middle, but like, it cracks me up.
And God forbid if they do, your dad's there ready with his handgun, right?
I'll tell this real quick. We did that one time. We went camping a lot. It was big for that was just good for I think my dad to get out of town.
Yep.
Because we would get those calls at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, or my dad would get those calls where he'd be like, I got to go in. Something happened. So just to be like, we're going to the Amish country, or we're going to Maryland, we're going to Vermont. Like he was away where he was like, look, I'm off. Like I'm actually off.
Yep.
But we went away one time and we came back and like a basement window had like a crack in it. And he's like, somebody broke in. And we're like, no way. Like so the kid threw a ball or something. He's like, PD, like we dust for fingerprints, all this stuff. We're like, come on, like, are you kidding me? So he did. He like got his Glock. He's like clearing rooms and stuff. We're like, dude. I'm like probably like 15. I'm like, come on. And damned if so they do the prints, and like a few months later, our neighbor who like at the time had a drug problem got arrested for breaking into a house. They lifted his prints, and they were the same prints on the basement window. And they're like, "Did you break into the Morris's house?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just wanted to take a video game from their basement. I knew they had." And he's like, "I told you." They're like every paranoid thought he's ever had just got like proven right. But
That's it.
he would be like, "Check your checkbooks, make sure they didn't take a single check." I'm like, I'm 15. I don't even have graduation money in there yet. But no, it's he talked about too, like becoming a police officer. It's a crazy thing because he did 2 years of college, I think either 2 or 3, and he got offered a job at Seagirt to start and was like, "Hey, Dad, like this is my dream. I want to do this." And my grandpa was like, "Yeah, take the job, but you have to finish school." And he did. He ended up going back and finishing school, but he took the job. And the way he always explained it is, he's like, "You're like an 18, 19-year-old kid." They're like, "Here's a badge, here's a gun, here's a car. You can speed. You can run red lights. You can.
In certain situations, of course.
Of course, within the AG guidelines and all that. He's like, you have the power to detain people, like all this, and it's like, and just use your discretion. And like you guys were talking about before, at 18, 19 years old, you have so little life experience,
right?
And all that, and it's a lot of power and it's a lot of responsibility, and then you retire, and it's kind of wild to go through. Decades and decades of, hello, officer, like, respect and things like that, to just going back to essentially being like a civilian.
Right.
So I'm wondering how you guys kind of see that play out with your members and things. Like I keep going back to this magazine, but corrections officers, they're saying, PTSD, suicide rates are high, divorce rates are almost 40% higher than general population, all these issues to deal with and things, and
especially in the corrections. So in the corrections section of our law enforcement community, I think those officers have the most difficult job than anybody in New Jersey in the law enforcement community. They are locked down with the inmates, right? At least with us, if you're driving around and I'm on patrol and I stop you for running the red light, right? There's a 50-50 chance that you're a good person and a 50-50 chance that you're a really bad person. In the prisons, they know all of those people have done bad things in their lives, and those people are bad people for the most part, right? So those officers have the unenviable job of trying to maintain safety and order within the walls of their correctional institution. They are subject to the most degrading incidents as possible, where the inmates throw bodily fluids on them, throw their feces, their urine, their sperm.
Yeah.
I mean, just the bodily fluid, the blood even, right? These officers are trying to open a door to give them their meal, and next thing you know, they're getting splashed with ungodly, unconscionable substances, right? Now you have to take that home, right? Now you have to worry that, and in most cases, in some facilities, there's not a shower facility for those officers. They have to come to work dressed because the overcrowding in the prisons in certain places were such that, they only have a break room or something like that, but they're coming to work fully in uniform and then just walking in the door.
Wow.
Right? And they're getting buzzed in. And now think about this. You're getting buzzed into a facility. You're going to be there for at least 8 hours of the day. And then, quite frankly, 16, because now you're being held over because of the overtime, because the next oncoming shift has called out. There's probably, I don't know how many sick, calls that they have for the next oncoming shift and things like that. So they're locked up 16 hours a day at most, right? For 25 years.
Wow.
Right? Think about that.
Yeah, and then flip that switch and go to your kid's soccer
and
game.
Flip your switch, or you're witnessing and being a part of such violence behind those walls, right? That none of us in this room can even fathom the violence that they're facing every day, right? 2 years ago, we had our president of our largest local union, president of the PBA 105, which is the state corrections union, and a couple of the other correctional officers come up and do a presentation on what's going on behind the walls, right? So they came in and did a pretty decent job. He was a little nervous, I could tell, right? Because we have 2,000 officers in our conventions, and think about the largest ballroom,
Sure,
and it's just full, right? The seats are full. They're standing, people standing around, mulling around. It's a large ballroom. And he got up there to show the pictures of the officers being injured, having the bodily fluids thrown at them. There's pictures of the officers. You could just see the shock on their faces, the disgust on their faces. You can even start to see like the PTS starting to set in because you had your mouth open and now all of a sudden somebody's feces got in your mouth or bodily fluid is in them, and now you're like, oh my God, now you got to go get tested. Now you got to make sure that there's no HIV, there's no other communicable diseases, and now you got to bring that home. Now you got to go home and kiss your 5-year-old or bring your 8-year-old to the baseball game or whatever the case may be. How do you turn that off? So again, the correctional officers and have just a tough job, and I quite frankly I don't know how they do it, but for them to survive their 25 years, and think about it, they've been locked down for 25 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like a sentence.
It's a sentence. Correct. For them, it's a sentence. And for those guys, I think those guys should be paid the most out of any one of us because of just the nature of their jobs. And unfortunately, they are, on average, they're probably right they're in the middle of our salary guys around the state, but still those officers should be the highest paid because of what they have to endure day in, day out. And even those officers that are part of the jail system and then they're not on the floors or not in the institutions, but they're the support staff, like they're the detective bureau for the correctional facilities. Even they have to go in there and be subject to bodily fluids being thrown at them, the violence, the assaults and things like that, because now they got to go investigate the inmate on inmate crime, whether it be a sexual abuse or an assault or something like that, where, not very pleasant conditions that these officers have to work in. And, no one sees that. No one talks about that enough, I don't think. And I think that was one of the reasons why when Mike and I first took over 2 years ago at that convention in Atlantic City, we wanted to show what those guys go through and those officers have to deal with on a daily basis. And again, I can see why those officers in the correctional setting have such a higher rate of PTS, have such a higher rate of suicide, have such a higher rate of divorce as compared to municipal or county police officers or even troopers, because, at least we can go out on the road.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And
nice sunny day.
And here's the other thing too. Let's say you get into a fight with your spouse, right? An argument over money or whatever the case may be. Now you can't answer on your phone because you got to take your phone away. The only time you can contact your home is when you're on break and you got to use a facility phone, right? You can't. There's no cell phones are allowed inside the facilities.
Wow.
Think about because
it honestly is like being an inmate. Like you have to use the prison phone to make.
Yeah.
Wow.
So or they now I think there's and I'm not sure about this, but I'm under the impression that they have when they go on their dinner breaks, they're allowed to go outside to their car, use their cell phone, but they can't bring their cell phones in the facility. So
some facilities you can't go outside.
Yeah, and that too.
They've changed them.
So these officers, again, have the toughest job, have the toughest assignment, and I can understand now why that those things we just talked about are higher amongst correctional officers than are against municipal or county police.
I appreciate you making that distinction. I kind of just lumped it together and said law enforcement, but you're right. That sounds like a very unique set of circumstances and challenges. I'm sure you deal with it on the side of when you're negotiating the contracts and the needs of,
the roles are completely different, but of course the level of stress and the mental health issues that we all deal with, because we are a closed community, we took a very strong approach to making sure that we're giving the peer support that we need. We have a group that specifically trained, and we use clinically trained,
clinically competent, culturally competent
clinicians to work with our peer support teams and to make sure even that our peer support officers are checked in with the clinicians, and then the clinicians check in with each other, because the differences, the needs of a law enforcement officer, whether it be corrections or a police officer, are going to be different. They're going to be, you really don't understand a regular therapist may not understand exactly what makes an officer tick, because when we have an issue that's mental health related, it could affect our jobs, very much so.
Oh, yeah.
Our ability to actually go to work, where another profession, you can go through therapy and you can have your time off, your days off, whatever it may be, whereas we can't do that on all cases. So we have to make sure that we're our members are very cognizant of that. They're very fearful of that. That if they
Of a
come
fitness
forward,
for duty
Yes.
issue.
Yeah.
So we've gone a long way working with the Chiefs of Police Association, working with the Attorney General's office, and working with, of course, our membership to understanding that it's okay to not be okay. And we have a program that can help people get through whatever they're going through at this point, and it doesn't have to hurt your job. And we're getting more and more every day. We're getting more and more cooperation from what's the biggest is the Chiefs Association.
Yeah.
I think there are still some administrators that are fearful of liability of having an officer that may not be quote unquote fit for duty. There's a long way to go between having a bit of a mental health issue, whereas a wellness issue, I should say, and being unfit for duty. The stress of a divorce, the stress of a child being sick, anything like that is going to affect your judgment. It doesn't make you unfit for duty. It's going to slow you down for a second. But if you can talk to somebody and get right back into work, that's what our goal.
Right.
I have to imagine that's going to be something that's kind of emerging, if it's not already, in your guys' profession, where it seems like, say, for example, if a guy tears his ACL chasing a suspect, you're like, yeah, no problem. Get whatever healing you need to do with the knee. There's no stigma around that. It's like, he's hurt. He needs surgery. He needs rehab, whatever. But I feel like for a long time there has been a like, come on, shake it off. What do you mean you just, saw a guy decapitated on the side of the road? Like, you're good. Go have a beer and, we'll get back to work.
And that's exactly how it used to be.
100%. And I feel like the world, or at least, the country is becoming more kind of caught up to speed with like, no, look, there's mental health issues that needs to get treated just as seriously as a physical issue. And just because you're having a tough time doesn't mean that you're unfit. It's just, sometimes it's an isolated thing. And
it's also like for us having to working as hard as we are to reduce that stigma of needing help. Because look, like we talked about before, we're paramilitary organizations, we're all type A personality. We're supposed to be strong men and women to go do this job and things like that. But even in the most, traumatic incidences, they always find a way to, even though I know officers that try to suppress those emotions and stuff like that, it always finds its way to come out. And now sometimes these officers may develop a drinking problem because they're trying to suppress those those issues or things that they saw. And by having our peer liaison team go out there and say, hey, come on, I'd rather talk to you over a beer and listen to your issues and listen to what happened to you and try to help you than go sit at your viewing or at your funeral and things like that. And that's a very powerful statement. When one of the peer guys said that to me, I was like, you're spot on. Yeah. This is why we need to do this for our membership, and not only for our members, but for the families. Yep. Because again, divorce is a high rate. There is a high rate of divorce rather in law enforcement. Because of all the traumatic incidences that these officers have experienced, also the shift work, getting called in, overtime, like your dad, like you said, there were times where he had to go in 2:00 in the morning and maybe miss something of like a family outing or a sporting event or whatever the case may be, So there's a lot of added pressure onto these families, and I think a lot of times our families, our family life doesn't get the attention it deserves, because behind a good police officer is a good family structure and an understanding spouse that can say, all right, I'm disappointed, but you make it up to me another day. Yeah. Like my kids now are adults. They're 22 and 24. They're both graduated college. I'm done. I'm happy. I'm free. You know what I mean? From all those things, right? And but you know what? I noticed that those guys, they go out and they do all their things and they do everything, and they are loud and proud law enforcement family members. And they can see the value of, having sure that, because I missed a lot of things growing when they were growing up, right? And now they can appreciate. And now when they go to work on Father's Day or Mother's Day, me and my wife don't give them a hard time because that's their job, right? It's what it is they got to do. I missed Christmases and Thanksgivings and stuff, the birthdays.
Midnight.
Right, exactly. Or sleeping. When I was supposed to pick them up at the elementary school, and I slept through the alarm, and I'm getting called. It's 5:00 in the evening. I'm like, oh, whatever. And I got to get up and race over there, and couldn't thank the teacher enough to stay with them because now she wasn't getting paid. You know what I mean? Yep. And couldn't thank her enough. But again, those are the types of things that happen. So again, there's a lot of attention that should be brought to the families because they have to endure some of the issues that the officers are going through. And when we can get these peer or culturally competent clinicians to go through and talk to these officers and get them in the right frame of mind, their family life is better, their work life is better, and then they have that work-family balance that we all strive to get.
That's great. I think that's really important too. Like you said, it seems like that it's the clinicians you have are kind of educated in the law enforcement specific issues. Like we do a lot of construction injury cases where, say, someone that's from Portugal or Brazil gets injured on a construction site, and there's a psychological element to it. It's not going to present in the same way as it would as, for example, like me or something. They might not want to share it or do it. So there's certain psychologists that, like, I think the DSM-5 or something they use to diagnose some mental health issues takes into account multicultural issues.
Yes.
And I remember specifically one guy saying, like, I feel like a nolto, which means like a nothing. He felt like a nothing because he used to go to work and he'd be so proud, and he'd hand his check to his wife and she'd do the finances. Be so proud of that, and he got hurt and he couldn't do that, and he's like, I just feel like a nothing.
Yeah.
But he couldn't. That wouldn't come out. Like I'd be like, I don't know, man. I'm just like, I'm having a bad day. Like I just feel like really down. Like this sucks when I'm injured, and it, like, because of certain just differences, doesn't come out. So law enforcement, I would imagine, is kind of the same thing, where it's like, no, we're good. Like I'm good, and it's like, you good? You're here, and then it kind of comes out.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
Can we hit on just real quick? Not real quick, as long as we want, but the pension system, how that's looking, how, the future is for.
So look, 2019, our predecessor, Pat Colligan, Mark Kovar, and I was our pension coordinator at the time, in partnership with other public safety unions, namely the Firemen's Mutual Benevolent Association, the FMBA, came up with an idea that we needed to take away our pension fund from the control of the state of New Jersey. Because at that time, the pension fund was failing. All of the state-run pension funds were failing because New Jersey just, had their, heads up their asses and just can't run, proper funds, right? Or maybe they weren't equipped for it. I don't know. But they came up with this law that we authored and drafted in conjunction with the FMBA. And we were able to basically segregate our pension fund away from the state of New Jersey's control. So for the last, 6-7 years now, right, since 2019, that we now have control over it. And then just most recently, probably in the last 3 years, they now have full control over it, where they're making their own decisions on investments. They've hired their chief investment officer. They've hired their staff out. They've hired their legal counsel. They're no longer relying on the Attorney General's office to provide counsel to the board, and then get off the dais, come down, and then fight a case against a member, right? So that, to me, that was just blew my mind at how that happened, right? So now we have a separate law firm. Well, not law firm. We have in-house attorneys now that they hired, and then they do outside counsel and things like that for certain things. So it's been largely successful in the last 6-7 years. In 2019, when we took over, we, like the public safety unions, they also came on board with the other law enforcement unions. When they took over the pension fund away from the state of New Jersey, it was valued at about a $26 billion asset. Since that time, we took over and hired our own chief investment officers and had their own investment strategies and things like that, and took away the investment strategy away from the state of New Jersey. They've increased that $26 billion to about a $36 billion asset. So $10 billion over the last several years that they were able to do this. Now, again, look, we had a lot of help, had a great economy, had a great, the market, the Wall Street markets, the finance markets have been in great shape. They've been returning. Everybody's 401ks and 403bs and 457 accounts have been earning pretty good monies and stuff like that. So there was a lot of help. So now, because of that, they're clawing back that unfunded liability, that percentage. Because back in the early 2000s, probably late 90s, early 2000s, our pension fund was about 103% funded, right? And then Governor Whitman came in and said, you know what, we're going to take money from the pension funds and we're going to then, balance the state budget. So since that time in 2000, there was a steady decline in the percentages of the state of the pension fund. Fast forward to 2019, it's valued at about 64, 65%. We take it over. Now it's at about 70, 72%. So that $10 billion, while it's a lot of money, offset the years of neglect that had occurred from 2000 to 2019. Excuse me. So the pension board members, they are fiduciaries. So they're making decisions and they're fiduciarily responsible now. They all had to, get independent insurance plans so that, God forbid, a member sued them for making the wrong decision. They're covered and things like that, punitively and whatnot. So they're making sound decisions for the fund. They're doing the right thing for the fund. They're trying to grow the fund, and everything that they've done in the last several years has proven that they are the proper stewards for this fund, and they are continuing to increase the assets of the fund. Now, there's I'm sure your dad, if he was here, the first thing he'd ask me, and Mike, where's my COLA? Where's my cost of living adjustments?
I said, I was with him yesterday. I said, Dad, anything you want me to ask? He goes, cost of living adjustment.
Right. So in 2011, again, through Chapter 78, through Governor Christie's tenure, he eliminated the cost of living adjustments for all pensioners in the state of New Jersey, all state pension, all public workers, essentially. So for the last 15 years, those retirees have not had a cost of living adjustment. Generally, it's the rate of inflation, or it's like a 2%, 2.5% increase. Even Social Security has had large increases in their cost of living adjustments over the last several years because inflation has reached astronomical levels. So picture this: you're on a $60,000 pension in 2000. Well, in 2000, that $60,000 pension was a $60,000 pension, right? Now you've got your cost of living adjustments from 2000 2011 over that 11-year span. That kept that $60,000 at $60,000. So you may have had a $2,000 increase one year, $1,500 increase the next year. It was based on inflation. So now in 2011, let's say that $60,000 pension in 2000 now is valued at about $72,000, right? Over the course of that 10, 11 years. So again, at that time, it's still valued at $60,000. So now, fast forward from 2011 to 2026, that $60,000 pension is probably worth about a $35,000 pension because of the inflation. Look, you see with gas now tripled basically. It went from $2.30 now, and now we're at almost $5 a gallon, right? So it's nuts. And property values have gone up, taxes have gone up. Just you go into the local grocery store, you're going to ShopRite. Everything there is increased because of trucking costs and gasoline, transportation costs and stuff like that. So everything has increased, and yet that $60,000 pension is now decreased to a $35,000, $40,000 pension. How does one live on that? Especially if you retired in 2000, let's say you came on the job in 1970 to 30 years, right? Those members, are the baby boomer generation, right? Now they're in their middle 70s, maybe late 70s. They can't work anymore, right? Because now they've reached to the point where, their body may be failing, their health may be failing, and they're in, late 70s, early 80s. That's where you have to enjoy what's left, your grandchildren, at that point, being realistic, you may not have much longer, right? Yeah. And, now we're living longer. Now those officers that retired, generally 5 years was the max, they'd be gone, right? Because of the shift work and the PTS and all the other things that were going on. So medical science has enabled us to live longer. Now we're outliving a lot of our things. Even in the private sector, you have people who are outliving their 401ks, right? They had $2 million in the bank and they were taking a modest $60,000, right, over the course of their lives. And now they're outliving that. And now these seniors are finding themselves legitimately going, all right, do I buy the carton of milk or do I buy my medicine, right? And now we're legitimately at that crossroads where these pensioners need to know that. And we're trying to figure out ways to come up with ideas on how to get cost of living adjustments back. I can't speak for the other pensions, the other public employee pension systems, but at least as far as the PFRS is concerned, we are trying to work with those stakeholders and our partners to try and figure out a way to get it back. We came up 2 years ago with an idea. We were largely almost the guys were mad at us, to put it mildly, right?
Because new guys.
It was new guys, old guys. It was everybody. Everybody was mad at us. We were trying to come up with ideas, and it was a preliminary idea that we were just like, all right, come on, give us your feedback. And overwhelmingly, we could have been like, if we walked in the PBA, the PBA barbecue, the guys would have been throwing their beers at us. You know what I mean? It wasn't that bad.
The biggest problem is that the restoration of coal is going to be very expensive.
Okay.
For whomever pays for it. We tried to come up with a way to get it paid for, partially by our active membership, and still it's going to be the same price, very expensive. So our active members weren't seeing the ability to make those same purchases, reducing their purchase power for the retired members. So it's a balancing act. There are those that believe the municipalities have to pay it, and the municipalities by law do have to pay it. But they have to come up with the money somewhere, which comes from the taxpayers, which comes from us.
Yeah.
So it's just where's the money coming from? So we have to figure out, that's the ultimate goal. Where can we get the most bang for our buck? We can't restore it the way it was, that's for sure. But we can try to figure out something so that some officers, retired officers, will get something more than they've been getting. And then try to grow that as time goes on to keep it more fair for everybody.
Right.
We recognize that it's unsustainable for people to try to live as long as they have been living. As Pete said, the way the pension system was based with the COLA before was based on a life expectancy of 8 years for a police officer, literally 8 years.
Wow.
And that was the norm throughout the country, in New Jersey, for everybody. That's completely changed. Thankfully, we're healthier, we're living longer, and for myriad reasons, but that's why the system as it was, we can't get back to that. Nobody can afford that.
Right. It's going to cost billions upon billions of dollars in order to restore cost of living adjustments. And again, where does money come from? And here's the thing: if the legislature and the governors prior to today, actually to when Governor Murphy came in, because he's really the only governor that actually submitted the full pension payments with the
budget or whatever.
Yeah, with the budget and stuff like that, right? And now Governor Sherrill has committed to paying the full pension payments. So if government would have been good government and did what they did for the last 30 years, their pension payments would have been about $500 million to about $1 billion, right? So now, again, you say only $1 billion. It's still a lot of money, but on a $63 billion budget, that's not even 1%, right? So for them to do that, so now, like for example, like in New York, right? They did the right thing by their pensions. They didn't rate it. They didn't do anything else like that, and their pension payments for this year is about $1 billion, right? In Washington State, right? They were such great stewards of their pension fund, the police and fire pension fund. They're about 125% funded, so they're overfunded. Now the legislature is trying to take that 25% away from them because they want to balance the state budget, right? But now they're going to put themselves in a real predicament, like here in New Jersey and everywhere else, and it's the big fight going on over there, right? So again, this is nationwide. This isn't just a New Jersey issue, right? But we have to come up with ways and figure out a fiduciary response. How do you say it? A financially responsible way to come in and do it so that it doesn't continue to the unfunded liability. There's no tax increase, and like the residents and taxpayers aren't going to get upset because somebody's getting something and their taxes are going up.
Now that the pension's essentially removed from the state pension system, it's kind of its own silo. Can it, God forbid, get gutted again? Can they reach in and take from it?
No, because in this bill that you'll commonly be referred to as Chapter 55, there's provisions in there that would prohibit that, or at least make it obstructive enough that you couldn't be done without a full legislature, things and the governor, and in other words, you'd have to create another law.
Okay. So I'll tell my dad to sit tight on this cost of living adjustment. Look, if you guys are on it,
it's hard to tell people to be patient.
Yeah.
When they've been suffering for all these years, it's hard to tell people to just sit tight. We got it. We're working on it. Look, we're going to retire one day too. We are trying to figure out a way to do it so that we can retire, and then all those current retirees will have it. the future retirees will have it, and then the officers coming on the job now will have it.
Yeah,
You know?
I don't envy the position that you guys are in, because you take from what to give to what. You know,
Right.
it's not an easy task.
It's not.
So that's why I
Again,
can.
it goes back to what I said earlier about the promise I took that I thought I had when I took the job.
Yeah,
I'll never be rich, but I'll never be poor.
Yep.
Because of the pension, and at the time, COLA, I would have the ability to maintain my lifestyle, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's been changed by legislative act, and that was
Yeah.
the part that's really difficult to handle.
I will say, you know, I grew up. My parents were able to pay for my brother and I to go to college. We had it like exactly what you said. I never felt like we were rich. I wasn't the kid showing up to the baseball field with like a brand new bat and brand new glove and all that. But like, I was signed up. I was there. My parents were able to be there and things like it. And I hope that, despite some of the hardships the profession's facing, that it still does have a lot of those qualities, because it's an admirable profession. It's a great line of work to be in, and you really can provide for your family. And like you guys are saying, you're protecting life and property, and that's, you know.
It's still a great job.
Yeah.
The challenges that you have to face are exciting. They're interesting, but they are challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you can overcome those challenges while you're doing it day to day, going from call to call, and you're affecting somebody's life the way you are, you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I did a great job today. I did a great thing. It's an honorable profession. And it's something that I've always been proud to be a police officer. I've always been proud of the job. And I think that people doing it today, regardless of what people say about us, I don't think they say it to us. The people that we meet day to day, the people that we encounter, somebody's going to be pissed that you give them a ticket but they really understand that it's part of the job, hopefully. But for the most part, the community really, really enjoys having police around. They want to make sure that we're there for them. They want us involved. You see, as we were talking earlier, the things that Pete and I get invited to as representatives of the local police departments. And that's a huge honor that we carry for us, that we love to do. But it just shows how many people we talk to daily that love cops.
Yeah, and they need to be more vocal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, they are the silent majority, and because everywhere we go, you know, even legislators are like, you know, you guys do a great job. Blah, blah, and they're very complimentary. And of course, we're like, well, you know, you got to help us out. And then there are legislators, and I got to say this, that have been in our corner every step of the way. You know, Democrat or Republican, they've been every step of the way. So we do have that support there. We just need to kind of figure out a way to, you know, get people more out of their shell and say, yeah, we love the cops.
It's funny that it's become such a politically charged thing, that if you're pro law enforcement, that can almost be like you're talking about the thin blue line stigma, where it's like, whoa, you're way too over here.
Yep.
And it's almost like a Google review, where if someone has an excellent experience, they'll be talking about it. If someone has a horrible experience, they'll be talking about it. So you have those, you know, those few that are on this side, but the vast majority are like, police officers are great. You know, what's not the law? Yeah, oh man, it sucks they give me a ticket, but thank God they, you know, that person that's speeding by my kid playing got pulled over.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
All right, I'm going to give each of you guys two last questions. What drew you to the union kind of labor side of this, as opposed to just the day-to-day police work? And then for listeners that have stick through to the end, tips for when they get pulled over, how should they carry themselves? What should they do? Is that little PBA sticker going to help them out if they're filming you and yelling at you?
Well, I'll tell you what. So what drew me to the union was when I was hired as a police officer in Point Pleasant Beach. You know, it was one of those instances where I was the first group of officers to get hired to replace all the officers that had, you know, 25, 30 plus years on the job, right? So we were in that flux of the senior guys were retiring, us new guys were coming on, the guys that were already there were moving into different managerial positions or different senior positions or different, you know, jobs within the police department. So I come from my family owned their own business. My dad was a contractor, subcontractor for these large companies, right? And he had a union shop, right? So my brothers were union glaziers, glass guys, right? And I remember going up to up into New York and doing all the stuff up there, and you know, having, you know, those guys doing all that stuff, right? And not being allowed as a, you know, 17, 18-year-old kid driving the trucks up to the city to step foot into the building because I wasn't a union guy, right? Never understood that, but I was like, all right, stop yelling at me. I'll go get a cup of coffee or whatever, right? So my dad had a union shop we were, again, growing up, we weren't exactly rich, but we weren't exactly poor. We were comfortable and never wanted for anything. You know, it was you had to work hard, but you would get, you know, things like that on your birthday, Christmas, and stuff like that, right? So seeing what the union did for my brothers and my family's business, right? It gave them the opportunity to make a good living, a good wage, and things like that, and they were protected, right? Until, you know, the economies, when you have an economic slowdown and no one's building, and you know, again, you kind of live and die by the economy, right? So what drew me to the union was, look, my dad was there, you know, advocating for his employees to get better wages and things like that, and then, you know, working with those unions to just do that. So for me, when I got on the job, I was like, all right, I was brand new. I was paired up with one of the senior officers. The guy was our PBA president, and the other guy was our PBA delegate at the time. And we had just finished a job, and we're sitting there eating lunch. I'm FTO, field training officer with those guys, right? And they're sitting there talking about the contract, right? They're sitting there talking about, all right, this is what we should ask for, this, that, and the other. And again, me being as, you know, naive as possible, being a police officer at the time, I was like, wait a minute. The town just doesn't give you those, doesn't just give you you don't just get paid. Like, you got to fight for this. Like, the town doesn't do all this stuff. We don't, you know, X, Y, Z. He's like, no, we got to bargain for it. We got to do this stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. And then sitting down listening to those officers was really where I kind of got interested in that. And that's when those guys retired, I took over for those guys, you know, in the various positions within my local PBA.
Cool. And you've just
kept
rising.
Thankfully
up
for me,
up.
it worked out, and here we are, you know, all these years later. And then, you know, once I became a PBA delegate, I got involved at the state office, at the state level, at the county level. You know, we got involved and just, you know, doing things all around the state. So again, it was just, for me, it became a passion to advocate for our membership and try and help them in the best way possible. You know.
Okay. I don't want to cheapen your response by asking you the tips for the people getting pulled over and all that, because you're here as a mouthpiece for, you know, honestly, a very powerful, a very influential, a very important union in our state.
Right.
And I'm not just saying that, but it's true.
Right.
You know, police officers play an enormous role in our day-to-day life, and it's like, I don't remember if we did this on camera or off, but like, it's one of those things. The second you took them away, it would be chaos. It would be a mess. It would be what you guys see when you go walk around Poland. It's an extension of just, you know, a totalitarian regime. So I don't want to cheapen it, but, you know, for the day-to-day people, my wife's dad was in law enforcement as well. And if she gets pulled over, it's the funniest thing. Like, she clams up. She's like, she can't say it. And I'm like, your dad's a police officer. Your father-in-law was the chief of police. Like, hand your PBA card, you know, say, hi, officer, I'm sorry. She got pulled over by one of her best friends, like husband's best friend. They were in a wedding party together, and she couldn't even say, hey, Kenny, how's it going? She just was like, and he gave her a ticket, and then was like, why didn't you speak up? Like, was like flipping out. So just for people that are in that mindset, like, just
look, you know what? If you're confrontational, you know, look, when I was on the road, I was never looking to issue summonses. People talk themselves into the summons, right? My mind frame was to, you know what, I'm going to stop you for doing 15 to 25 in a residential area where kids are playing. Hey, do me a favor, slow down, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the moment they became confrontational, all right, guess what? You're getting the summons. Or, you know, or the other way, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, blah, blah, blah. I was distracted because my son, you know, the kid's in the car seat in the back, and I was trying to hand them, you know, a drink or whatever, and it just wasn't around. Okay, just do me a favor, slow down, right? Please be more mindful of what you're doing. I just think that the confrontation aspect, like you talked about before, with someone, you know, walking out, you walk up to a car and they're hitting you with their phone recording that officer, you know, more than likely that person is probably going to get a summons, because you know, unless the officer can, you know, through his verbal judo, if you will, to sit there and talk about what happened. Why are you doing this? What's going on? You're being recorded also. I have a body camera. You're like, stop, you know? I just think if the more polite the people are, the more professional that the officers are, I think those two aspects will, you know, those people will either, you know, get off on you know, just with a warning. And I think that just be honest and just say, hey, yeah, I did, you know, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this to an attorney, but, you know, because it's self-incrimination, right? But, hey, yeah, I'm sorry. I did that because X, Y, Z, you know? All right, just do me a favor, slow down. Now, look, there are officers out there that because they may be on these grants where like Click It or Ticket or the zero goal initiative where there's going to be 0 fatalities and 0, whatever. They have to go out and write summonses, right?
Is the end of the month quota thing
That's
true?
it. No, there's no quota in the state of New Jersey.
Awesome.
The New Jersey PBA prior to us fought very hard to get that bill into
That's
law.
great.
So there is no quota. Anytime, anyway, if the police administrator is going to be hanging up your name and your badge number with the total number of summonses you wrote and total number of traffic stops you did for the month, that's a quota that should be taken out, and we can even advance that. We can provide that law to those people for that, because that's something that we hate as police officers. That, hey, it's the end of the month, it's beginning of the month, you got to go out and fill your quota. That's illegal.
That's great, and that's helpful to know for again, because we never 100% know who our listeners are. Like we've had judges on here, other attorneys, just all different. We other attorneys listen to it, but at times we assume it's just members of the public, like normal people. So that's helpful for them to know, because I, again, as the son of a cop, I'm like, oh man, it's the end of the month. That's why this guy might be. But that's not a thing. So that's helpful. So no one that gets pulled over can be like, well, it's because it's the end of the month.
Yeah. Again, just being cordial. Just look. I always say, treat the officer the way you'd want to be treated. Treat the officer like you're treating your mother or father or your loved one. And if you're going to be that confrontational and you're going to be that such of a rude person, more than likely you're going to get a summons. But if you're that person where you're treating that officer with a little bit of respect and compassion, that officer is going to do the same thing. Because I know with me personally, when I was on the road, I gave what I got. When I walked up and said, Officer Andreyev, Point Pleasant Beach Police, may I see your license, registration, and proof of insurance? The reason why I stopped you because you were doing 15 to 25. The moment I got what the fuck you stopping me for? Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't do that. You're sure your radar's right? Like, it's calibrated. All these things. I got to do.
Well, it's a tuning fork that calibrated.
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, I have the sheet.
Exactly.
Or my favorite. I don't believe you. I want to see that you locked in the speed. No, we're on the busy side of the highway. No, you're not getting out of the car. I'm not going to put your life to get out of the car and walk back 20 feet to my police car just so you can see the stupid radar. No, come to court. And those people would get the summonses. But again, it's just a simple factor. Just, again, right? We all want to be. We just be nice to one another, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to be that good neighbor, right?
Yep.
Every religion teaches being a good neighbor to one another, right? Why not just have that principle when you're getting stopped?
That's helpful. Like that, Mike. You got some time to mull over your answer.
Sure. I became a union rep. Like Pete, my mom was a union CWA worker. My grandfather was a Teamster. My uncle was a Teamster. So I understood the union lifestyle. That always helped. When I became a cop, very early on, within weeks of me becoming a cop, I kind of made an enemy of one of the administrators. And I was targeted for discipline, I guess you'd call it. Completely unfair, completely unjustified. And the delegate that was my predecessor at that time, he was a really strong union man. He really believed in fairness. He believed in fighting for the little guy. He did not like the bullying that he saw right away. And at the time, I wasn't even a PBA member. I hadn't been able to join the union because I was still on probation. So he took it upon himself to protect me. Didn't have to. I wasn't obligated to, but he did. And when I saw that, I said, this is a good dude. This is a guy that I could follow anywhere. And we became really good friends. And he was the delegate. I almost immediately became a member of the executive board based on some, attending meetings and showing that I had a little bit of negotiation skills, I guess. And that just moved up. And from that moment, I realized I'm a problem solver by nature. I do that as a police officer, but I needed to be able to do that also for the police officers who were there. I never sought promotion. I couldn't be a sergeant, couldn't be a lieutenant. That just wasn't going to be me. The way I could help the city of Summit Police Department, was by being a union advocate. And I just stuck with it and met many, many people, more mentors. I followed them and got to where I am now, and I'm very pleased that I did. I hope some other people are pleased that I did, but I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish. So being a union rep, I think, is just, you have so much more of an effect on so many more people than you can have just as a sergeant in small town police department. So I think that's the way that was what drove me, I guess. How can I affect the most people in my life? And being at this point executive vice president, state PBA is probably it.
That's great. And just looking too, I think I told you, but I looked through all the articles you've written through. It's Cops Magazine.
Yes.
Yeah, you look like you're a prolific writer too. You're touching on all these, the topics along the things that you care about.
Oh, that's great because when I was handling labor, I was kind of restricted to negotiation stuff, labor stuff, grievances, and things like that. I had to find something every month to come up with. Now, I can write about anything. So
yeah.
I kind of wait until I get the deadlines. Your article's due today. Let me start typing.
We work better under pressure.
Yeah, it's the same thing. But look, honestly, the PBA seems like it's in great hands. Appreciate everything that both of you guys do. How can people that are listening either give to the PBA, contribute, help out, and anything that people...
So we only have one charity. We're a 501c3. It's called the New Jersey PBA Survivor and Welfare Fund. What we do with that fund is we provide monetary assistance to our officers that are injured, catastrophically injured, or the families who are the survivors of officers who were killed in line of duty. During COVID, when our officers, before we even knew what COVID really was, our predecessor, Pat Colligan and Mark Kovar, tasked me to go get $100 gift cards from ShopRite and mail them to the officers who were quarantined for 14. Remember in the very beginning, where everybody was, as soon as you got COVID, you were quarantined for 14 days, and you couldn't. And in some cases, these officers were quarantined in hotels because they didn't want to get their families sick, right? So, they tasked me to go get $100 gift cards and mail them to because at that point, ShopRite was really the only ones, and the other food stores as well, were doing home delivery and stuff like that. We did that. So that was for the benefit and welfare of our membership. And again, we do scholarships for the officers that are active and retired, so that their children, we do a $2,000 scholarship for them. They have to be a graduating senior going into their freshman year of college. And we provide a $2,000 scholarship. Now that's probably one of the most competitive scholarships around because it's 32,000 members.
Yep.
We get thousands of applications, and then they have to weed it down to 40 boys, 40 girls, and in 2 hardship cases where maybe the child was sick, and overcame some adversity. Maybe had some childhood diseases and things like that, and overcame adversity, and now going to college, right? So, and that's a big accomplishment all unto itself. So we do a lot of things like that. We are constantly raising money for that reason. We have 3 fundraisers a year. We do a golf outing in May up at Trump National up in Bedminster. We then are doing, that was just May 4th. Actually, in June 4th, if anybody's listening, they want to come out and hang out and have a couple of cigars with the members of the New Jersey PBA and our friends and supporters, we're going to be at the Proving Ground up in Highlands on June 4th from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And we're going to get 5 premium cigars, open bar, buffet. It's going to be a good time, and it overlooks the Sandy Hook region of Monmouth County. On a clear day, you can see the Manhattan skyline. You can even come by boat. So if those that are listening that want to come by boat, and then we do a second golf outing in September, where again it's at Trump National. We just try to raise money for survival and welfare. So everything we do when we raise money is raising money for that fund. Again, it's a 501c3. We also provide assistance to other unions around the country. We're part of this association called the National Association of Police Organizations, or NAPO. And when a NAPO member group experiences a loss of an officer in the line of duty or a critical or catastrophic injury, we try to send monetary assistance to those associations as well. So we also, through that fund, we send our hospitality trailer. We have a group of officers who, when there's a line of duty death, the police funerals are just it's something to see, it's something to witness. It's unfortunately, over the last several years, we've gotten good at it, at doing these funerals and things like that, which is, unfortunate. But for those officers who are attending those funerals, we have a comfort trailer that goes out and and we make hot dogs, dirty water hot dogs, sabrettes. We also grill up pork roll, egg, and cheese sandwiches and things like that. So we give a little taste of New Jersey.
Sure, I was gonna say very New Jersey.
Very the taste of New Jersey to like Pennsylvania. We went as far as Colorado.
Wow.
When the officers were killed in Colorado, and as far south as Mississippi they went to, right? Dallas. We went to Dallas when those Dallas officers were ambushed in 2015. So that trailer has spread New Jersey's brotherhood and sisterhood throughout the nation, and we couldn't do it without the generous donations through our 501c through the Survivor and Welfare Fund.
That's great.
I think it's also important to note that people can give to their local associations. That's what we really want. Reach out to your local associations. Make sure you support the local associations. Nobody in the state PBA, no member of the PBA, no PBA local association is going to contact you by phone. They'll do mailers and they'll do direct emails where they'll invite you to something that's happening locally. But if you get called by someone proposing to be law enforcement, they do not represent a police officer in the state of New Jersey. That's not allowed.
It's a scam. Hang up.
We can tell you that right now. It's a scam.
Yeah. All right. Very helpful. So mailers.
Mailers, absolutely the mailers, because now you have to see the address where it's going to, and you can contact whomever is contacting you before you send out anything.
And oftentimes, like in my community, in my department, what we do is in that mail or that on that letter, we write, if you have any doubt, please call 732-892-0500. That's a police department's telephone number, and ask for a police officer. They'll be able to verify this.
Great. All right. Well, Oscar, we'll put in the link to the show notes. It's the Survivor Welfare Fund.
Yep. Survivorwelfare.org, I believe it is.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes and things so people can go on there and donate. And then, we'll get the message out too. Give to your local PBA. I think PBA 234, my dad was. Yep. So we'll do it. Yep. Guys, thank you. Thanks for your time, honestly.
Thank you.
Michael, Peter, thanks for everything you guys did.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
This is great.